So I recently shot a short film on actual film, 16mm, and we shot it on the Bolex H16. And I was really curious about the process of working on film, how that's different from digital. So I asked my director of photography a bunch of questions as far as what film stock he used, tungsten or daylight, how lighting is different from film and digital, what the viewfinder is like with a monitor or just seeing through the viewfinder, processing and scanning, and what the post workflow is going to be like. This is everything you wanted to know about working on film.
What is it like shooting on film? It feels very like there's only one chance to get whatever it is that you're shooting. Everybody like holds their breath when you hit roll. For this project, we wanted 16mm because it has a really soft quality to it that's like kind of nostalgic and romantic. You have 35mm, you have 16mm, and then you have Super 8, which is really, really tiny. Regular 16mm is just a 4.3. The Super 16, you're kind of benefiting from on the sides a little bit, which we did. The Bolex we had was modified to be Super 16. You get enough detail compared to Super 8, which is really, since you have such a small amount of film actually recording the information compared to over double the size, which is Super 16, you can really see the grain and the softness of the film itself and kind of get the sense of that analog feel. Whereas 35mm can be so, the grain can be so fine and sharp that it almost is seamless with digital nowadays.
Okay, go ahead and reset. And rolling. And action! And cut.
I would say if you wanted a cleaner image and a little bit more dense of a negative and you wanted to use wider lenses, 35mm is going to be a better option because you got just a physically bigger plane to put a more lens basically on. With the Super 16, you're kind of dealing with a crop factor if you want to think about it that way. You're a little bit more limited with how wide you can go and how fast you can go with the aperture. You can get shallower depth of field with 35mm, and with 16mm you get shallower depth of field than you would if you had 8mm. Most digital sensors like the Arri Alexas, they rate it at 800. Film stock days, it's usually you have a stock that's rated either tungsten or daylight. We were shooting 500T, which T stands for tungsten, meaning the color is already balanced in the film, unlike today, which you can basically dial in the color temperature, the Kelvin, tungsten being 3200, daylight being 5600, and you would use daylight or tungsten correction filters to shoot in the opposite environment of what your film stock is rated for. I was shooting the tungsten balanced film in the daylight without a filter because we were kind of going for a cooler look anyway. And since we got the log scan, your white balance, you can adjust it pretty drastically in post if you need. So I like to remove filters and things because when you're shooting on film too, focusing is harder. Once you start putting NDs and things in front of the camera, you physically can't see through the viewfinder.
Very nice.
ISO is based off of ASA, which is the film ratings would be like 50D, 250D, and 500T. 50D being the cleanest, but needing the most light to expose properly, balanced to daylight, so it's great for exteriors. 500T, great for interiors, low light. There are multiple reasons why to choose one stock over the other, but typically it's just the shooting environment and the grain structure that you want. I tend to lean towards the 500T the most because it's the most sensitive, most interesting grain. So the Bolex is one of the first, I think, widely used like 16mm cameras back in the 30s and 40s. Back then they only cranked their cameras. They didn't actually have many cameras that were sync sound. You hand cranked it, you didn't have any external power to be rigging up. You have the limitation of how long that crank will actually unwind, especially if you're shooting at higher frame rate or over cranking it, you have much less time. And for this film, we did a mixture of 24 frames per second and 30 frames per second and 32 frames per second. The cranking is more of a con before anything, I would say. The only reason I didn't mind the cranking for this project was because of our tight budget. We didn't have the luxury of shooting crazy long takes, so it was like it's like 27 seconds on the Bolex at 24 frames, full crank. is what you'll get out of it. So that was like a good way of keeping us kind of on schedule. But you can get like battery mounts for the Bolex, and you can bypass the crank altogether. If you're gonna shoot dialogue with any film, you're gonna also need a crystal sync motor, which the Bolex doesn't have. You know how if you record like audio for like 3 hours long, it'll start to drift like time code? It's kind of like that. It's the actual mechanism isn't perfect. Crystal sync is a physical thing you add onto the camera. It regulates it so that it's on time perfectly at 24 frames per second.
We have 1.5 rolls of film left. So that's like 3 minutes. I'm confident we won't get everything.
The Bolex H16 nowadays rents for $100 to $150 just for the camera. We had an PL adapter for our Bolex. So we had Zeiss Super Speeds that we shot on. They're very nice lenses, basically my favorite lenses. Those rent for a few $100 a day. And then you have the film itself, the raw film stock, a 100-foot spool. Daylight spool is only, I think it's like $40.
We shot the film using 5 100-foot daylight spools. Each 100 feet spools was $35. So 35 times 5, that's 175. We did a 2K scan, so that was 166. And then we had something called a global access in-store pickup. The place I did it was Pro 8mm, and I think they just put it onto a flash drive and they gave me like the film back. That was $58. So basically what it comes down to is I spent $400 to get 500 feet of film, of 16mm film, to get it processed, scanned onto a flash drive so that I can edit in Adobe Premiere. There was one weird thing which I couldn't figure out. When I got the film back and the film onto my flash drive and I was able to watch it back, there was missing footage. Like there was like 4 or 5 shots that we had shot but didn't end up being on film. Like we didn't see like the beginning and then the film just like rolled out. Just completely 4 or 5 shots was missing. So I honestly don't know what the thing is, but maybe that's a thing to look into. If there's like very important shots that you need to do, maybe do it twice or something. Yeah, we honestly don't know why these shots were missing.
People would say that 35mm is the same as 4K, and 16mm is HD, and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. You can scan film up to 6K if you have a 6K scanner, because all you're doing is taking a massive, more detailed picture of the actual analog film. So I've scanned Super 8 on 4K. It looks great, because you just see more of the nastiness moving around, like the grain and like the fluctuations of the actual film moving in. Lighting on film is difficult because young DPs like myself are spoiled with monitors. I think other than not having a monitor for direct feedback on my levels, like a waveform, which is typically how I'd expose, I start with like a base kind of f-stop when you start a scene that you tell your gaffer and your AC that you want to be shooting at. And then from there, once we go into actual shooting, it's usually my monitor that I'm relying on. Lighting for film in general, you're relying on your meter more. Just to double check your contrast ratios. No, I don't think the monitor was necessary. I think the monitor takes away from the discussion a little bit. You want to put red tape or any tape. I put red because in the film industry that's pretty standard for don't open or don't touch or don't erase in the camera department world. I'm trying to stop light leaks from getting in through the actual door that you remove during the reloading process. The Bolex is pretty easy to reload. It's a daylight spool. You can have a little bit of light in the room compared to like a 400-foot mag or 35mm you would be loading in a changing 10 pitch black. Something that always surprises me for sure when I shoot film, because most days I'm shooting digital, getting it scanned, and once we had a log scan, meaning there was no color timing or anything applied to during the processing of the film. It was as flat as a scan as you could get, so you could color correct it more in post. And I'm always surprised at how much information the scan still retains, especially with negative film. The amount of information we got to color correct with was definitely more than I had expected. I would say you can be as cost effective, if not more, if you're shooting on film. It's just you have to think things through more, which not every project you can do. Digital can handle a lot that is thrown at it, whereas I feel like when you're shooting on film, you do want to have a rough plan, a detailed plan if possible, of what you're about to do and what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. Yeah, it's hard to convince people to shoot on film because a lot of time it's their own money that they're spending, and they want to It's a big risk when you're making a film. Any size amount of money that you're putting into it yourself it's going to mean a lot to you and be very important that you see it through and nothing happens, and the magic box that is a film camera can sometimes scare people away. We end up shooting a lot less because you're more film conscientious, and even if you keep a respectable ratio in mind, you still always end up shooting less because you're thinking things through and having more conversation, and then that saves money on the back end for editors and people fixing things later.
What's going on with you, Virginia? How do you like shooting on film?
I quite like shooting on film. We get to really have to live in the moment. There's not a lot of chances.
That's true. There's only a finite amount of film.
Yeah.
It's tough to give the actor the accommodations they need and the time and space they need if you're like shoestring budget trying to get everything in one take. Usually that's not gonna turn out super great. It's a difficult process, but I think again it comes back to the discussion of talking things through and rehearsing things that much more so that there's ends up in the end being a clearer image of what needs to be done and how it needs to be performed. As much of a DP heart that I have, I think I have like a filmmaker's heart above that, and I know when I'm watching a film, it can look not great, but if the performance and the writing and like the character, I'm all about character dramas and getting invested in the character, and if that's happening, then I can usually overlook things. But that's probably not a normal DP answer, but maybe not, I don't know. I would say shooting digital is limiting in ways that you wouldn't expect because there's so many options. When I'm shooting digital, there's a lot of technical jargon and noise coming at me. A wireless this, there needs to be like 17 monitors up. Everybody wants theirs to be color corrected and be exactly what they're saying, and never is the case. And in some cases that could be a good thing. I mean, maybe you want a more collective creative force, but when you're shooting on film, it's the planning and the discussion that goes on before each shot, I think pays itself off once you actually watch the final film, because there's a more cohesive, if you're talking about what you're doing so much while you're doing it, you're gonna naturally go back and forth with ideas and get better and better until it's the shot is as good as it can be, and then you move on, you roll it, and then you're done.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Cool, I think we're good.
All right, dog. Yeah. Sorry I couldn't give you.
Dude, no, that was great.
Hopefully you can
That's
get
probably
like.
more than enough, more than I need, to be honest.
Yeah. Hopefully you can just like cut each word.
Thank you guys for watching this video. I hope this answered some questions you had about shooting on film. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments. You can check out the short film with this link or in the description below. And let me know if there's other aspects of filmmaking you want to know about. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.